Like we showed recently with the visual techniques for horror, what you do with the visual elements of your film is paramount to immersing your audience in a scary, unsettling, or just tense atmosphere. And of course, those visual elements start in production with location, production design, the lighting, composition, and even how you choose to move your camera. But the final step and crucial one for any film is always the color grading. In the grade, you can lighten up something that feels grim or make something that's bright feel more unsettling. But with horror, often the aesthetic choice is focused on a dominant color and sometimes pushed to a surreal level. For example, in The Ring, you get these overall blue tones. In Saw, it's almost fluorescent green. Then in other films like It, for example, you see a more classic look, closer to the famous teal and orange, but with a warmer atmosphere. Contrast also has a significant impact on mood. If we look at It Comes at Night, you have a strong contrast throughout the film with scenes where you can barely make out the background. In The Conjuring 2, we find a rendering close to the bleach bypass effect with colors that are not very saturated but have high contrast. Then you have vignetting, which is where you darken the edges of your image to draw the viewer's attention to the center of the screen. And then one of my favorite elements, film grain. This gives you a great organic film feel but also makes the image feel maybe a little gritty or imperfect. And what we're looking at here is all the references we brought into Milanote while planning the episode, which Milanote is also our partner for today. In here, I've created a board for the episode, then I made columns for different films that we could populate with reference images. Then I can share this board with my colorist Benjamin to take a look at and make changes if he needs to. And I've been talking about this app for years, and for good reason. It's a perfect tool for development, and the best part is you can try it for free. They do have a paid version, but the free version has plenty of goodies, so you can try now without spending a dime. And I always say that it's like a digital creative wall because that really is the best explanation. It's perfect for story development or all of pre-pro, really. I even used it to create a temp for a website that we eventually made for a contest we did a few years ago. So you can create different boards that say organized, use columns to drop in ideas, links for research or images like we did here. Then you can share this all with your team to get and give notes. And of course, they have a great mobile app to go along with this too, so you're not just tied to a desktop. Again, you can try this out right now for free, so check that out in the notes below. But we have all of our reference images all set, so let's jump in and try to employ some of these ideas to lean into a horror look of our own using color grading. With our first shot here, this is clearly set up to be horror. A lot of work was done in camera to lean us into that world. But what we have here is a log clip shot on red, so there's still a lot of work to do to get this to its final horror glory. So first, we're going to conform to Rec 709. We'll apply a color space transform on the node and configure it from the red log to the Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, which is the standard. Then we're going to add a new node before the color space transform to make our primary corrections. We'll do it before the Rec 709 conversion because we want to take advantage of the total dynamic range of the log. Now we're going to increase the color temperature slightly using the white balance. We'll take it to around 40 here and we'll go to 15 in the tint. After that, we'll push the dominant into the reds with the color wheel for the gamma. Now we're going to use a new tool in DaVinci Resolve 18, the depth map. And to use it, you got to drag and drop the effect onto the node tree, otherwise it's not going to work. So we'll activate the preview and adjust the settings to separate our foreground and background here, creating a depth map that will intelligently create a mask for us. So after that, we can add a node, and then we're going to bind the mask to this node. Then in our key tab, you can see which areas this is going to be working on. Those are represented here in white. Now with the color wheel offset, we'll push the hue towards cyan just like that. And in this scene here, we have these candles, which I am a big fan of adding practicals into any shot. It does so much in helping bring the frame to life. And we're going to highlight these candles a little more by using the halation effect. Halation is something that occurs when shooting on film. With film, highlights like this will have a slight red-orange glow around them. So we can use this effect to lean away from the digital look and more toward an organic film look. To do that, we're going to add a new node and apply the halation effect, and we'll make some adjustments so that the halo is mostly on the candle flame, since we want this to be a subtle effect that you feel more than you see. Then on a new node, we're going to apply the lens reflection effect to give us a lens flare here, similar to an anamorphic flare, and we'll reduce the intensity of the effect until we're happy with it. Next, we're going to focus on the overall look by applying a creative LUT. Here, we are going to use the LUTs from the cinematic pack created by IWLTBAP. Link in the notes below for that. So we'll create a new node and then choose a LUT that matches the mood that we want to create. There's plenty of LUTs that would give us a great end result, so it's really a taste thing to get get closer to where you want your image to land. But for this one, the F6590 is looking interesting, so let's go with that. If we go into the key tab, you can reduce the intensity of the LUT with the key output. Here, 80% is looking pretty good. Now I can modify the rendering of this LUT by modifying our nodes located before the LUT. And finally, we're going to use the contrast pop effect. This will adjust the contrast in the mids to give us a sharper look, much like clarity in Lightroom. But there you go, a simple look that leans us into what we already have in camera. For our second example, we're going in the opposite direction with an exterior day shot. We have a great zoom here that's giving a nice tone to the shot. So let's see how we can get this to lean into more of a sort of modern horror feel. In Resolve, we'll add a node here for our conversion to Rec. 709. We'll apply the color space transform effect and configure it to our footage, which is red log film to Rec. 709 gamma 2.4. Now again, to take advantage of that wide dynamic range we have working from the log, we're going to make sure we do as many corrections as possible before the color space transform effect. This way, those adjustments are working off that full range of information and not the crushed image after the conversion. So for my primary corrections, I'll add a node before, and with the RGB curve, we'll adjust the exposure a bit here to taste. Then we'll add a parallel node to adjust the white balance here to increase the temperature of the image, and I'll adjust the contrast on this node as well. Next, we're going to add a series of 3 parallel nodes, and again, we are doing this before our Rec. 709 conversion. The first one will be to calm down some of these colors that feel too bright, like the greens of the trees and the blues of the sky. On the second node, we're going to increase the overall saturation, and on the third, we're going to do a more localized saturation tweak. So we'll go back to that first node of the stack, and with the color warper, we're going to shift the blue-green to green, and for the green of the trees that's too bright, we're going to shift that slightly, but above all, we're going to reduce the luma there to about 0.12. On the next node, we're going to reduce the saturation to around 46 and increase the color boost to 10 or 11. Then we'll reduce our shadow slightly to -9, and with the white balance, we're going to warm up the image a little bit more with 240 in the temperature and -12 in the tint. Now on the third stack node, we're going to reduce the saturation of all the colors except for blue and red. So we'll select our points and lower the saturation by almost half, and here's a before and after of that. Next, we will use the texture pop effect, this time after the Rec. 709 conversion. We're going to adjust the strength and the details, and this will give us some sharpness to the image. Now I'm going to create a heavy mood by adding intense vignettes to the top of our image. So we'll add 2 nodes in parallel just before our color space transform and create a large power window like this here. Then we will bind that mask to the node below and reverse its effect in the key tab. With our RGB curve, we will reduce the exposure of this area and then add a red-orange tint with the offset color wheel just like that. Our character in the center of the image does need a little bit more emphasis, so let's add 2 parallel nodes here, and in the same way as in the previous step, we're going to create a mask on the first node, then adjust the exposure on my second node. Only this time we are tracking the selected area so that the correction remains in the right place. Now on a new node, use the RGB mixer to slightly rebalance our overall colors. And to finalize our look, we're going to be working after our Rec. 709 conversion. We're going to add a node where we will apply a LUT at a relatively low intensity. Creative LUTs like these are handy as a final touch to harmonize a series of shots and take you the rest of the way toward your tone. We tried several, but in the end, the one we liked best was the F6630. Now, we have this great zoom happening on the shot, which made us want to add a little something to give a very subtle, almost push-pull vibe, like you've seen not so subtly in Vertigo and Jaws. So we'll add a new node and apply the lens distortion effect to it. Thanks to this effect, we can simulate the anamorphic aberrations of a wide-angle lens and play with those distortions a little bit. So we'll go to the beginning of the clip, adjust the effect like this, and activate the keyframes. Now we're going to go to the end of the clip, readjust the effect like so, and that gives us this effect here. Not a push-pull at all, but it's giving this subtle effect that again, you almost feel more than you see. Finally, we'll finalize our look with 2 must-haves. First is a light vignetting. In the advanced mode, we'll choose the triangle shape, and we're going to increase the size as well as the anamorphism. Finally, we'll toss on a little grain at the very end node using the 35mm 400T preset, and we're done. Obviously, there are a million directions you could take either of these shots, and if you want to try them out for yourself, we got both of them on Artgrid, link for that in the notes below. And if you do give it a shot, send us your results, link for all of that in the notes below too. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.